Hello and welcome to the World War II Cards instructional video. This video will cover the rules of playing World War II cards. This is an example of a unit card. Every unit has an attack and a defense power. In the middle row, the attack power is on the left and the defense is on the right. These numbers will be explained shortly. Also, in the top left corner, the large number is the amount of movement points it costs to place the card down. And the small number is how much it costs to move and attack with. Again, these will be explained shortly. Down at the bottom, you can see the name, which has no effect on the game, and in the box, you may also see other abilities that the card has unique to it. At the start of the game, each player has a headquarters card. A headquarters card has 1 attack and 20 defense. The objective of the game is to destroy your enemy's headquarters. Soon, how that happens will be explained. At any given time throughout the game, the battlefield may look like this. There are 3 lines to the battlefield. Each player has a support line. For example, if I was playing a game against somebody, this would be my support line, and this would be their support line. In the middle is a front line. The support lines are where all cards are placed down. The front line is where a lot of the action takes place. Cards may not be placed into it, but cards can be moved into it. Actions like this will be explained soon. Only 1 player can have cards in the front line. For example, in this situation, I have a card or cards in the front line. For my enemy to access the front line, they would first have to destroy this card, and then they can move their cards into the front line. There are 6 different types of cards. There are infantry, tanks, artillery, bombers, fighters, and support. The first 5 are all units, while support cards are their own category. The type of card is indicated by the middle. This is the symbol for infantry, this is the symbol for tanks, this is the symbol for artillery, this is the symbol for bombers, this is the symbol for fighters, and this is the symbol for support cards. Infantry are the standard card. They can only move or attack on 1 turn. Moving and attacking will be talked about shortly. Tanks are next. While infantry can only move or attack on 1 turn, tanks have the ability to do both on the same turn. Next are artillery. While tanks and infantry must be in the front line to attack something in the support line, artillery do not. For example, here, I can attack the enemy headquarters from the support line. Artillery also do not receive damage in return for attacking. Next are fighters. Fighters can attack anywhere from anywhere, like artillery. However, when a fighter attacks, it does receive damage in return. Next are bombers. Like artillery, bombers can attack anywhere from anywhere on the battlefield. However, they do not receive damage in return. There are some rules that restrict the use of bombers that will be talked about shortly. Finally are support cards. Support cards are not used in the same way that infantry are. When you play a support card, you perform the action that is described in bold below the card's title. There are 3 actions that can be performed by units. The first is being placed down. When placing down a card, you put the selected card in your support line, the card cannot be used until the next turn after it is placed down. After a card has already been placed, you can choose to move it into the front line. When a card is in the front line, or if it is an artillery, bomber, or fighter, it can choose to attack. When attacking, you choose which enemy you desire to attack. For example, in this situation, I'm going to attack the enemy's artillery unit. When this happens, you deduct your attack power from its defense. In this case, its defense is 3, which means it gets destroyed. However, it also has 2 attack, which means 2 gets deducted from my defense. Since my defense is 3 and their attack is 2, I deduct 2 from my defense of 3 and put a 1 over the defense power, indicating my card has 1 defense left. This card also gets destroyed. There could also be situations like this, where I attack my enemy, but neither card gets destroyed. For example, I attack them with an attack power of 1, which brings their card down to 3 defense. But they also defend with 1 attack, which brings my card down to 1 defense. In the same situation, if it is my enemy's turn, they can attack from the support line into the front line. If they choose to attack my card, they would attack at 1, bringing my card down to 1 defense, but I would retaliate with 1 attack, bringing their card down to 3 defense. In the case of artillery, if I attack my enemy, I do not have to be in the front line. I can attack from my support line to their support line. In this case, I have 2 attack and it has 5 defense, so I can bring it down to 3 defense. Because this is artillery, it does not receive any damage in return. In the case of fighters, I can attack from my support line to their support line, like I can with artillery. However, I do receive damage in return. Here, if I attacked my enemy, they would go down to 3, but I would also go down to 2 defense. With bombers, I can attack from the support line to my enemy's support line. In this case, I would bring my enemy down to 2 defense, and I would not receive any damage in return because it is a bomber. Any of these things can happen with headquarters. For example, here, I can attack with my tank and bring its defense down to 17. However, I would also receive 1 damage in return because headquarter cards have an attack of 1. There are special, more complex rules when attacking with fighters. These will be explained shortly in this video. Support cards are not placed in the support line like other units are, and they cannot move or attack. With a support card, when played, you perform the action detailed below the name of the card. If I were in a situation like this, I could play this card. It says, reduce selected infantry unit's defense to 1 and increase its attack by 3. Since this is a support card, I just perform the action that it says. Here, I would bring its defense down to 1 and raise its attack to 4. I then discard the card after it has been played. Another example of support cards is in this situation, I could play this card. It says remove all friendly cards from the front line and put them in your hand. Fully repair them. This means that I can fully repair my cards, meaning raise its defense to its original number, and remove them from the battlefield. This card then gets discarded. There are many more than just those two support cards. It should be easy to use them, because what they do is said on the card. This is going to be the most difficult to explain segment of this video. Air battles work in weird ways. When I'm attacking the headquarters, I take the total attack power of all of my planes, which in this case is 9, 4 plus 2 plus 3. I then subtract from that the total defense of all of the cards in the enemy's support line. In this case, the enemy has 5 total defense. 3 plus 2. So 9 minus 5 is 4, which means I would deal a total of 4 damage to the enemy's headquarters. Then my planes would also receive damage in return. The total of these 3 cards are 1 plus 3 plus 3, for a total of 7 damage. I get to choose where that damage is dealt, but bombers cannot receive damage. So, in this case, I can choose to divide the total of 7 damage between my 2 fighters. I might choose to do 4 to this fighter, destroying it, and then putting the remaining 3 on this one, bringing it down to 1. There are 3 common abilities that units may have. These are Courage, Protection, and Blitzkrieg. They all affect the game in different ways. Protection guards the 2 cards that are adjacent to it. Blitzkrieg allows the card to move, and if it's a tank, move and attack on the turn that it is placed down, whereas other cards cannot do that. Courage means that the card's attack power is +1 to what it says when it is defending in the support line. Set up here is an example of what protection does. I have my card with protection in the middle between my headquarters and another unit. Protection guards the cards that are adjacent to it, meaning that these 2 cards cannot be attacked until the enemy destroys the card that has protection. For example, if this card wanted to attack my headquarters, it could not, because it would first have to destroy my protection. So it could attack this until it is destroyed, and then it would be able to attack the other cards. The same goes for a bomber or cards of the sort. This card cannot attack my headquarters or my other units until this card is destroyed. It is also very important to note that protection cannot overlap. In this situation, these 2 cards do not protect each other. If a card has protection, protection cannot affect it. Here is an example of what Blitzkrieg does. I can place this card down, and on the same turn as it is placed down, I can move it. Other cards cannot do that. Because this is a tank, I can also attack on the same turn. However, if this was an infantry unit, it would not be able to do so. The third common ability is Courage. Courage means that while defending in the support line, this card gains +1 attack. So here, if this card attacked my tank with Courage, instead of dealing 2 damage, it would deal 3, which is 2 plus 1 extra. However, if I were attacking the enemy, it would not receive the extra attack power, because it is only effective when defending. Also, if it were set up here, and this card attacked my card, it would not receive the extra attack, because it's not in the support line. Another important rule is that if there was a contradiction between two rules, the offense wins the dispute. For example, in this situation, if I were to play Carpet Bombing, which deals 3 damage to everything in the enemy support line, my enemy may say that these cards do not receive damage because of the protection. But since there's a contradiction with the rules, I, the offense, will receive the advantage, and 3 damage will be dealt to every card in the enemy support line. There's an additional kind of support card called a countermeasure. To determine if a card is a countermeasure, you can look below the name and it will say countermeasure in italics. A countermeasure is the only card that you can play on the enemy's turn. For example, this one says the next time your enemy deploys a unit, destroy it. An example for the use of that card would be, if it is my enemy's turn, he may deploy a unit, such as this. If he plays that, I can choose to play a countermeasure. This countermeasure would end up destroying his card. And my card also gets discarded. When it comes to the movement points, you deduct the number of movement points it says from your total for your next turn. For example, in this case, on my next turn, I would only get 5 instead of 8, because this card costs 3 to use. This final section is the most important one, and also one of the most complicated to explain. To start, each player can have a deck of 30 cards. This is the limit, not the minimum. So, you can have up to 30 cards, but it is okay to have less. It is recommended that you have at least 20 cards when playing. This deck can consist of any cards you'd like, except for headquarters, as you can only have 1 headquarters per game. At the start of the game, each player has only their headquarters on the battlefield, and each player begins by drawing 5 cards from the top of their deck. It is important that before you begin play, you shuffle the deck very well. This is my hand for the start. On each turn, you get 8 movement points to spend. A card's movement point cost is indicated in the top left. For example, this card costs 4 to place down, and 1 to move or attack with. At the start of my turn, I can choose to place down this card. It costs 5 to use, and I have 3 remaining to spend. However, I have nothing that I want to do on this turn, so I end my turn. My opponent is then able to make his first turn. He starts by choosing which cards he wants to place down. He places this and this. That adds a total of 7 movement points, meaning he has 1 left, and there's nothing else that he wants to do. From here on out, at the start of every turn, each player draws 1 card. On this turn, I choose to use my artillery to attack twice at this. This card has the ability that it can attack 2 times in 1 turn. So I use it to attack the Coldstream Guards twice, which does a total of 4 damage, and because it is an artillery card, it does not receive any damage. Since it costs 2 to move and attack with, I am now down to 4 movement points. And because I did 4 damage to this card, which has 6 defense, I place a 2 over its defense, indicating it only has 2 left. I then finish my turn by placing this card. The actions I performed add up to a total of 8 movement points, which is my limit. which means I end my turn. On my enemy's next turn, they start out by drawing a card from their deck. They choose to move this card into the front line, which costs 1 movement point. They then place down another card. This has amounted to a total of 7 movement points, and they have nothing else that they can do, so they end their turn. At the start of my next turn, I draw a card, as always. Here, I can choose to attack with this card once and destroy this card. When it is destroyed, it gets taken off the battlefield and moved to a discard pile separate from the rest of the battlefield. At a cost of 2, I now have 6 movement points remaining. I decide to spend these last 6 by placing down a bomber, which costs 4, leaving me with 2 remaining. I also choose to use my remaining to attack the enemy's headquarters. Because I did 2 damage to the enemy's headquarters, I put an 18 there, indicating it is down to 18. On my enemy's next turn, they draw another card. They like what they draw and decide to play a support card. In this case, carpet bombing. It says deal 3 damage to everything in the enemy support line. That means that all of these cards receive 3 damage. In this case, they all have 3 or less defense, which destroys all of my units. It's turns like these that really shape the way a game of World War II cards works. Because it says everything in the enemy's support line, it also does 3 damage to my headquarters, so I place a 17 over it to indicate this. I then discard the card. This card costs 8 movement points to play, which means it takes up the entire turn. I now begin my next turn by drawing another card. I decide to place another unit down. But my enemy does not like this and plays his card, which is a countermeasure. This says the next time your enemy deploys a unit, destroy it. And because I just played a unit, it gets destroyed, and this card also gets discarded. There's nothing else that I would like to do on this turn, so I end my turn. My enemy begins by drawing a card again, and these turns repeat until the game is over by destroying one of the headquarters. I hope this video did a good job explaining how to play World War II cards. If you are interested in purchasing World War II cards for yourself, visit the World War II Cards website via the link in the description.